Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW395 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for the links to the articles that we're covering, or for my snarky comments on those articles. We also have Mr. Jason Wood joining us. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, good to be back with everybody again.
Good to have you here. All right. And this is a kind of a weird week. We had a ton of funding and acquisitions to talk about the last couple of weeks. Not much this week, so you won't see any of that. So kind of went in a different route here. And I created a new category called Threat or Distraction, all about AI, because there's so many startups focused on securing AI that are really just an extension of something we already had. Right? It's just, ChatGPT Enterprise is just a SaaS app, right? So why wouldn't you just use a SaaS security product to do that? I mean, those are already new enough. Now we have like SaaS security products just for AI. So your AI governance products, I guess. But yeah, let's start with the number one item I have here is the disappointingly small, and this was on the show notes for last week, but I moved it over here because I'm pretty sure we didn't get to it. But if this was the EU, Change Healthcare would have a huge fine for everything that happened there. But apparently,
to be fair, they might not exist if this was the EU.
Yeah, but apparently the maximum financial, and I should point out that at some point, I think after the breach or during the breach or just before the breach, United Healthcare acquired Change Healthcare. So we're talking very large. I think that is the largest healthcare insurance company in the U.S. But yeah, apparently the maximum financial penalty for a HIPAA violation set by the HITECH Act is $1.5 million.
That's definitely lower than most security tools cost a year for a company of that size, right? You want to buy a bunch of firewalls and a license for your SIM and all of that. Like these are all more than 1.5 million each.
It's less than 10% of the ransom that they paid the attackers.
So I guess that was the real fine. The ransom was the real fine.
Yeah, I blinked when I saw this one because I was 1.5 million. I mean, all right, if you're a smaller healthcare organization, like a small regional type of outfit, this would be terrible, right? 1.5 million. So that would be a terrible thing to be hit. If you're UHG,
yeah, you read that and you feel like there's like a zero missing somewhere. It's got to be a typo, right?
Yeah.
And when I first brought this up, my partner was like, well, I mean, what's the CEO's bonus? Like, how big is his bonus compared to this? I was like, well, he doesn't get one because he died. So
I shouldn't laugh.
Yeah.
But it is true that it is much lower than CEO compensation. And
it is.
If you don't make those big enough, then it's just cost of doing business. Like we see in so many other aspects, like Jason, you were saying it for a small provider might be quite threatening or eliminate your profit at least for a quarter or whatever. But for a big one, it's just so small. It's like if some countries have speeding laws where your speeding ticket is proportional to your income. Yeah. Like I think Norway or Sweden has that. Yeah,
in Scandinavia.
Right. I think someone beat the world record, was like the CEO of Nokia who got a speeding ticket in like the 6 digits for sure.
Yeah, like $150,000 speeding ticket.
Right. And that kind of makes sense in a way because, if you told me you fined me like 5 cents for speeding, I wouldn't really care about the 5 cents, probably more the points. And it seems like that's what's happening here, but there's no points on the license.
So I actually just did a quick look up. Andrew Whitty, the CEO of United Healthcare, because they have multiple CEOs for the different divisions and whatnot. His 2023 bonus was $1.8 million. So there you go. His 2023
he could pay it personally.
His 2023 bonus was larger than the fine. So yeah. I don't think they're hurting too much over this particular fine. It's just like, oh, well,
and if insurance paid it, like it didn't even come out of their, out of their books.
Okay, does insurance cover fines for like regulatory fines?
Oh yeah, yeah, I believe so.
I figued the insurance companies you're on your own for that one, sport.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that's those are like the two most likely things that you're going to get hit with cybersecurity insurance. Like your general policy, probably not. Probably something we'd need to have an insurance expert on. I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I've asked that question and I've looked that up, and yeah, it'll pay a fine.
Oh, well then. Okay.
Listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that question has come up before, and it does.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as penalties go to large organizations, we're going to take you to the mat. We're going to hit you with everything we got. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, I think you want to be careful that the potential fines are not so huge that people don't even want to do business in a specific market. But I think between the two ends of the spectrum, there's plenty of space right here. So.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I think making them proportional is the right way to go about it. Having a percentage of something, right? Like that's. I think that's.
There's
GDPR has no low end. I've seen GDPR fines for $18,000. Right?
Yeah, the
Even
thing
smaller.
though with some of the EU laws is sometimes they'll use a percentage of global revenue.
Yeah.
And when you start doing that, it starts being quite tricky because now you might want to look at the potential risk of doing business there, right? Like, our global revenue is 100 billion, but EU revenue is 1 billion. Potential fine is now bigger than right, exactly. So there's definitely like impacts and unintended consequences all the time, but I think we can push a little bit more before we run into those.
Yeah.
There's a little room.
And I think from there, it makes sense to jump to my story number 5, which just came up the other day.
I'm sorry. I laugh at this because I had a similar reaction as you.
Yeah. So coming from the tiny number of $1.5 million for a fine to cost of cybercrime and like cyber incidents going over 12 trillion for 2025. We've just gone from one extreme to the other, where I think if you add up all the direct losses that we see globally every year, like you maybe get a couple orders of magnitude below that. And then, indirect costs are tough to estimate, so indirect costs would be, I don't know, I guess a class action lawsuit after a breach, that would be a direct cost, but impact to the company's image, the loss of revenue, the stuff that's much harder to tie, much harder to track.
What's the GDP of the US?
Like 40 trillion?
So this is saying that a significant portion of the US GDP is what the cybersecurity breaches cost worldwide.
$7 trillion.
$27 trillion. Okay.
In 2023. I did look this up though, and I was like, okay, well, how much is this for the world? The world's GDP is 106 trillion ish.
Okay, so more than 10% of the world's GDP is just going to
crime.
Absolutely not. That is not cybersecurity.
Well, crime, I might believe it, but cybercrime, no.
Cybersecurity isn't even like top 5, for most of the big businesses out there, in terms of like the fraud industry is happy if they keep shrink, theft of product under like 5%. Right. And cybersecurity is, maybe 1 or 2% at most for companies that get hit really hard. I think to reach this $12 trillion number, every single company hit by a breach in 2025 would have to just immediately go out of business, I think, to be able to hit this number. and then maybe you hit 12 trillion. And that is not happening. We know traditionally, I actually keep a list of every company that's gone out of business after a cyber incident. And we haven't hit 36 companies on that list yet.
Well,
And
we've seen this before, and it's like, what are the sources for this? How do you calculate that?
I chase them down.
And they even mention like DDoS in the specific article, and it's like if I'm selling $1 million worth of stuff every second, if I'm down for 10 seconds, does it mean I lost $10 million in revenue? Mm-hmm. Probably not, right? Like people are going to come back in 11 seconds and try again. So I think there's a lot of like these numbers, and it just reminds me of a lot of reports by a firm that rhymes with Pokemon. So
yeah. So in some of these cases, that's what happens is they take all the revenue and they take those revenue numbers.
That's a RIAA technique of saying like literally everyone who ever downloaded an MP3 on Napster would have bought the full album, right? So we lost $12 trillion. It's just the same math.
We lost more money than the industry has ever done.
So I was poking at this article a little bit, and I look at the top. Oh, here's the source. You click on the source. Oh, wait, it's the same organization. The same. Yeah. I mean, there's no source.
Yep. Nope.
There's no idea how they came up with this.
So the Computer Crime Research Center is some kind of Ukrainian cybersecurity think tank, and founded in 2001. And the website very much looks like it has not changed since 2001.
Which is great. And they also have RSS and all that. So props.
Yeah, a very functional website. And I can't speak for the quality of their other research, but the only thing, the only thing coming even close to a methodology or any data on this claim is that they say external market figures suggest that the cost of cybercrime is predicted to reach over 12 trillion by 2025. So I have no idea what external market figures refers to. And I have contacted them and asked them to clarify this. So I'm giving them a chance to react to that. But the other source is, for these kinds of claims, the $10.5 trillion one comes from Cybersecurity Ventures, which is Steve Morgan's thing, which also uses the name Cybersecurity Magazine, and they'll write Forbes articles and things like that, and they will use that cyclical.
It's all very self-serving and Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme in a way, and it's kind of like, all these reports. Oh, there's 1 million jobs that are unfulfilled in the U.S. in cybersecurity, which would have an average salary of $278,000 a year, coming from the people who are going to sell you certifications. Yeah. So I think it'd be nice if we had some better research than that. That's less biased.
That ISC squared one, that's an interesting one, because the fine print there, if you go back and read what they say, they're not estimating the amount of unfilled jobs or the amount of job postings. Right. What they're saying is this is the amount of jobs that should exist in the cybersecurity industry.
Based on
and
what,
aren't
right?
filled. So they're saying for every, I don't know, they probably have some formula for every 100 employees, you need to have one security person. And they just added up all the employees and all the companies and said 3.5 million jobs are unfilled.
Which is good, because we know throwing more people at a problem always solves it. So
absolutely. In fact, if we get the three of us together typing on the same keyboard, I'm sure we would take care of everything.
We could hack anybody.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
6 hands on one keyboard? Absolutely.
It'd be perfect.
All right, let's do it this summer at Black Hat or something like that.
Yeah. For those listening or watching, if you're confused, look up 4 hands, 1 keyboard, and you'll find the clip that we're referencing here. I think it was NCIS.
Yeah, I think so. Or it might have been CSI Cyber, but one of those.
Yeah. It was a TV show. It was a ridiculous scene in a TV show. All right. So I want to get you all's take on this. So threat or distraction. And I've kind of created this category because I keep seeing these stories where they're like, your company's, going to have an incident because somebody typed something into ChatGPT or into DeepSeek, or like somebody pointed out the other day, I'm using another Chinese. So I've got an e-paper phone. So it's like a phone format or like shape and size and everything, but it's an e-ink device. So I use it to read Kindle. I use it to read Substack, and it's made by a company called Books, which is based in China. And somebody told me, I think I saw something somewhere. It said all your data is going back to China. And my response was like, better than Meta, better than my data going to Meta. This is, magical thinking that, okay, because a Chinese company owns this, the data is going back to China. And therefore, if the data is going to China, bad stuff happens.
Well, I think it's even worse than that, because in many cases the data is not actually even going back, and just because it says China on the thing, people are really quick to jump to conclusions. So yeah, if your data is going back, sure, the government probably over there has control over it. In many cases, if it's like the list of books I'm reading, it probably has less of an impact to you to have a foreign government know that than your local one, right? So in some cases, like you said, like, oh, do I prefer China or Meta? Like, that's one thing. But then there's, I think, especially around AI, and you've got it in the list, right? Like the DeepSeek was such a trigger for so many hot takes. And in a large portion of them, there's a huge amount of confusion between, okay, there's a SaaS product. When you use it, the data goes back to the company. Yeah, of course it does. And then confusion between running a local model versus running like an iOS app. And I think a lot of people were conflating where we're saying like, yeah, but you can run it locally and make sure the data doesn't make it back out. A lot of people saying like, no, it's still connecting. And then you realize that they're talking about the app, not the model. So I think it's just
large language models don't have TCP stacks embedded.
Are there vulnerabilities and like in pickle files and whatever like that? That's a thing. But the model itself is not talking back to its mothership. Right. But if you're using it, and is it a novel, interesting thing to say if you're using a SaaS platform, the data you put in it is going back to the SaaS provider? Like, what is this, 2009?
One of the things that's frustrating, I mean, when you start talking about this, like Meta versus a government like China or whatever, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in general about, like, I talk to plenty of people who grumble about Facebook and how they, what happens with the data when it shows up in there and weird things that go on there. And so they're distrustful about that. And they're distrustful about governments that don't get along with our government. And, China's kind of an easy one to pick on, but they've also, partly because they've made statements where, one of their congresses, where they lay out their policy for the next period of time. They're pretty upfront about in this their statement.
14 years, I think it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in one of those, not the most recent one, but there was one in the past where they were pretty upfront about it. That, hey, the intelligence service is here to support the business environment, and the business service is here to support the intelligence agencies. Yeah. Well, that's not a comfortable feeling, but it's Facebook exists to support Facebook and gather up that data and do metrics on it and figure out all of these things.
The highest bidder.
Sell the data to somebody else, and so you were talking about privacy.
I was just gonna say, like, privacy for a person versus a company is also very different. And I just hit my standing desk. So, for example, in my personal life, I might want end-to-end encryption everywhere, and like I care about that. But if I'm consulting and I'm using Google Workspace and collaborating with different customers, do I really care that it's not end-to-end encrypted for like my corporate data? It's with Google, which I think is probably amongst the best in terms of security. It's not encrypted, like whatever. Then we have companies entrusting significant amounts of or all of their data to, say, Microsoft and AWS. But then again, like, that's fundamentally different from someone using a SaaS platform or any tool that's hosted online and potentially asking very sensitive questions.
Right.
And the real risk might be very different from from what you feel the risk is, right? When it's more personal and It's might be
vibes
harder
and
to
feelings versus
right. Exactly. Which
actual outcomes. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's weird, seeing people get fired up about, downloading a DeepSeek model, not doing their homework on that versus, Microsoft has shown time and time again they can't protect customer data.
But it's
Just
accidental.
right, right.
Yeah.
But like, where are you going to spend your time? Where are you going to spend your money and investment? Like, what hills are you going to choose to die on? You know, it just doesn't. So that's the question, right? Threat or distraction on
Yeah.
this kind of stuff.
I mean,
I think
Bruce,
this one distraction for sure. You even had people claiming that DeepSeek lied, and then you about the cost of training the model, and pretended that was like an attack on the market, right? Oh, they said this so they would crash Nvidia and the U.S. stock market. But if you actually read the paper, they're really clear that the number they came up with was whatever amount of GPU hours times $2, because roughly that's what that GPU should be worth in a cloud environment, and they're H800, which we don't really have here. But kind of makes sense. But then everyone said, oh, but they have 50,000 GPUs. That's worth $1 billion. They never said they included the cost of infrastructure and R&D. But if the same thing had come out of like Belgium, the discussion would be completely different. And probably people would be looking at, just reading things a little bit more before freaking out. But I think because this is also happening at the same time as like new administration, the TikTok ban getting postponed, and just like too many things, too many distractions at once, I'll say.
I like Bruce Schneider's comment on some of this stuff where he says people are really bad at judging risk. We have emotion that gets involved in this and stuff like that. So you have an airplane crash and everybody freaks out and is scared of flying when your risk is still insanely low.
Yeah.
But we'll jump into the car and drive, and I do this all the time, jump into the car and drive 800 miles. Well, I can tell you which one was riskier.
Yeah. Yeah. At 90 miles per hour.
Yeah. And
10 or 20
it's
over
winter
the limit.
time and we're going through the passes of Montana. Oh, we really amped up the risk.
Unlike planes, cars can't flip over, right?
I've got pictures of my son that disproves that.
Ooh, hope everyone was fine.
He was fine, but yeah, truck's on its side.
Yeah. So for those listening, not looking at the stories right now, I had 3 listed under threat or distraction. One is focused on the data that people are putting into SaaS services. So uploading a document to ChatGPT, typing stuff into chat.deepseek.com, whatever it might be. Then the next one is talking about the big risks from using open source AI models. And I really hate the headline on that one because open source AI models, there's almost zero risk. The only thing you need to know is don't use anything that uses pickle, use safe sensor.
It's going to be interesting when we see like vulnerabilities that are not just like a serialization attack and there's like some code that gets executed or what. But if someone built like a legit malicious model that for all intents and purposes looks like a really good model, but then like it's a super targeted attack and some bank starts using it and all of a sudden all their risk decisions get completely wonky and they lose $1 billion. When we see that, that's going to be like an amazing feat, but for now that's not what we're talking about. It's just like, you're downloading stuff from essentially a GitHub equivalent and you're running it and there might be risk. Okay.
And that kind of threat is super. We know exactly how to catch that kind of threat. We've already got 36 companies doing AI evaluation where you're looking for bias and weird answers and risk and stuff like that. It's kind of like last week I think we talked about a vulnerability in AMD's chips where there was an unsafe way to update the microcode, and the proof of concept that Google did made the RAND function only spit out the number 4, right? And that's something you could totally build a test for. Like these are all things you can build a test for. Like nobody should be getting surprise attacked by their AI model.
I think we're going to see like some cool research about that. And we're going to see more ways that this can be exploited, but the code execution is not like the big thing that people are making it sound like.
But again, your next ransomware event will not involve an open source AI model. putting everything into perspective.
We're pulling packages from NPM, like billions of them all the time, right?
Yeah.
With
how many?
Well, I mean, when I read
almost
this,
all of those, there has been stuff, but it's almost always a researcher, some kind of security company or researcher that puts in the malicious NPM packages. Not always, but
one of the things that as I read this, I was sitting there thinking, well, this sounds like, let's go way back when you had the argument between commercial software and open source software. And, oh, look at the huge security risks of running this open source software that anybody can commit to and stuff like that. And of course, you had the opposing argument. Oh, but we had all of the eyes looking at it, and that'll eliminate all of the security bugs and all this other stuff. What we found is neither one of those really played out that well, because we still have security bugs. But no, it wasn't, okay, there's some edge cases or some different things I could point at where somebody poisoned something or whatever. But for the most part, if you pull down an open source application and run it, you do a little bit of homework and stuff like that, you're fine. I mean,
it's like
this is going to be kind of the same thing.
Supply chain issues are issues, and then we see things like the executils that someone found.
They failed, right?
Well, no, because someone found it in time. But that was a good example of like eyes on the problem. But it took like someone that was intensely focused on performance saying like, oh, this kind of looks weird, and then you can't really rely on that. But at the same time, have commercial vendors, especially in the security space, proven that their closed source appliances, VPN boxes, and firewalls and email gateways are good? No, they haven't. So I think in reality, you just got to expect that everything you're going to use is going to have vulnerabilities. And I think in many cases, there's a lot of this doesn't really need a backdoor. Even if someone wanted to put a backdoor in, they don't need to, because it's weak enough that if they need to break into it, they could just do that, right? So I think that's also a reason why you don't see a lot of backdoors, like voluntary backdoors. It's just a bug. So,
yeah. To put it another way, I think a lot of these are sales pitches for shark repellent.
Yeah,
crossed my mind.
All right. Yeah, and the third one I didn't mention was the DeepSeek iOS app. I don't think they have an Android one. I think they just have an iOS one. And there's analysis of the app, and sure, all your data is going back to China, but I think we've passed a point where you can really have a scary malicious app on any of these mobile app platforms, unless you
it's sending back the data that the app has. But we saw, was it like last year, a lot of people started talking about TikTok and privacy, almost as if the app in the App Store had like a 0-day to bypass sandbox rules and was like reading everything, when in reality, there's like so many social networks where now iOS makes it a little bit more granular. But can I get access? Look at LinkedIn, right? Can I get access to your contacts? Yes, boom. Everyone you ever talked to just got spammed, right? So that's what's happening. It's not like technical exploitation of anything. And what I thought was really interesting was on iOS, by default, your app needs to use TLS, right? Like you need to specify which domains you're going to call without TLS so that they're going to be allowed. So let's say you made you made an app that connects to an ad network that's not TLS. You would have to specify that. And they're using that so they don't have to use TLS. And now like we're freaking out about that, but weren't we freaking out about the destination? Like what do we care that it's not TLS anyway? It was already the worst thing ever. So that was kind of interesting. But that being said, that mechanism of making apps declare where they're going to use clear text communications is great, because you can look at the app manifest and you can know right away. Apple probably should have blocked it, because I think it's against the rules, because they didn't have to exclude TLS. Probably next version is going to have that fixed, which will solve nothing regarding the destination of the data. So,
right.
I think, so I was talking to somebody about this recently. We were talking about TikTok as the example, but it could probably thread into here with like DeepSeek or something, where, okay, we're sending or we're trusting this platform to give us information. Let's say China decides to do an influence operation of some scale and whatnot, and so they're sending back different
Propaganda.
results and trying to influence people who are reading it. And there's things in the news where we can find that China has done influence operations, Russia's done them for years, some U.S. does it. I mean, influence operations are part of the thing, and so do the social media companies, because we've talked about how the algorithm pushes things to our face that gets strong emotional reactions. It gets us angry about something.
But people conflated privacy versus control of media, essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean that's not privacy, right?
There's a lot of conflation.
But exactly, but people are conflating both, right? Like, oh, TikTok is getting banned because of privacy. Is it?
Yeah. The videos are published out there for anybody anyway, right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's about as close as I can cut. It's like, okay, there's your threat or for this.
Yeah. Even the argument that you're going to kind of slow trickle, poison people's minds with how you feed them the content with your special algorithm. Like already, there are hundreds of books and articles about how domestic social media companies have already done that. So,
and to me, both of those are bad.
Yeah,
to be clear, neither of these are positive outcomes to me.
Yeah. All right, so I added some stories on Guillaume's behalf because I knew he was joining, and he's got some spicy takes online. I think I want to save your story number one for the last thing that we talk about because that's a fun one. Yeah, I think the simplest one, easiest one to cover first is the Kagi. I guess that's how you say it. I pay for the search engine. It's this idea that
I think it might be Kagi. So now we've confused everyone listening, and we're sure everyone's going to be wrong.
So I saw a pronunciation guide somewhere. Let me go see if I can find it.
Okay.
While you look for that, so it's a paid search engine that's got like really good search, lets you tweak settings like, I never want to see results from Pinterest and so on. But because it's paid, you obviously have to be logged in. And then if you customize your results, obviously you have to be logged in, and they have to know who you are. What they've just released is a really interesting way of allowing people to do searches that are going to be anonymous. So essentially the way it works, and it's based off of an RFC on Privacy Pass. If you look at their blog post, they've got all the links at the bottom. But as a paying subscriber, let's say you're allowed to run X amount of searches a month. I think this is only available for people on the unlimited plan right now. But while you're logged in, you can essentially request a ticket that will let you run, say, 2,000 searches for the remainder of the month. Once that ticket is generated from the server's point of view, it's no different than a random value, so it cannot be tied back to you. And so then if you're using either their Chrome extension or they're using their browser, Orion, you can provide that ticket and run searches that will be completely anonymous when it comes to how you log into the the search engine. You're not logged in, so any preferences you might have saved before are not going to apply, of course, because this is a truly anonymous search. And then on top of providing that, which I think is awesome, it's awesome to see a paid tool for which you have to be logged in. Think about, how do I let people use this anonymously? And they've also deployed the Onion service if you want to anonymize your source IP at the same time. So I think if you're running a search with Privacy Pass over Tor, it would be very difficult to find a more private way to do a search on a search engine that you have to pay for and be logged in. So glad to see them pushing on the privacy side. And one place where they don't have it yet is, I mentioned they have an AI assistant. You can run questions to a bunch of the different or chat with different models. That might be a place where having privacy would be awesome, right? You want to ask something that's related to, I don't know, like medical history or whatever. We were just talking about people uploading stuff to the different hosted AI vendors. So I think they mentioned that that's planned for the future, even though they don't have it now. So that might give you a way to completely anonymously query OpenAI models or Claude, Anthropic, or I think they even host their own copy of DeepSeek right now. So you want to use that without sending the data back to China, you can use Kagi or Kagi, and then maybe in the future you'll be able to do that anonymously. So, love it.
I did find the pronunciation.
Yes.
Kagi.
Haha.
Kagi.
Kahgee. That's what they
All
say
right,
under
all
their
right.
about page. So
Perfect. So it's a hard G like in Guillaume, so you won't forget.
that's right.
There we go. And all that, and good quality search results. Like I almost never find
Yeah.
myself needing to go to Google with anything now that I've been using Kagi for a while.
So, all right, having not used it, how does it handle I mean, so like we have a whole massive industry around search engine optimization. So you get, 50 pages of useless crap because it's got all the proper keywords.
Mhm.
How is it for like, hey, I actually have a question and I need, like, are you getting good answers back? Or is it very similar experiences to like using Google and
So
got everybody's optimizations?
Full disclosure, I'm a super small investor in Kagi. I actually know how it's pronounced. I'm really trying to confuse people. But the reason I did that was every year I would always try to use an alternative search engine for like a week, and I would rage out of it within like 2 days because the search results were bad.
Yeah, U.com, Niantic.
Then I started using this, and I was like, oh, the search results are good. Then you have like additional features that help you make it better. Like, for example, you want to only search forums. I want to see people talking about my TV and this issue and whatever. And I don't want to get like 60 million fake reviews or whatever. So they have a concept called a lens, and you can create your own lenses. Like, oh, I'm doing research on this. Okay. You should look at only these websites and so on. And they even have like their video search has a de-clickbait feature for, well, including YouTube, right? So if you search for videos on Kagi, you'll see the thumbnails. You can switch to thumbnails from something that's actually in the video, and it's not just like a big face going, "Oh my god!" So they're spending a lot of effort there. I'll say the place where I'll still go to Google is usually for like I'm looking for like a local store. And like I'm in Quebec, most of the stuff is in French. So it's not, but on my main computer, especially for like all the technical searches I do, I run easily 1,200 searches on it a month. And it's the first time I had something that's been better than Google for me. And that's why I started paying for it. And at first you're like, oh, I'm paying for this. I've been using search engines for free since like 1996. But the reality is it's becoming so hard, and the more AI content there's going to be, that it's just great to have someone that's incentivized not by ads, but rather by what you pay for.
I was paying for Perplexity, and it replaced once it added the AI answers, it completely replaced my need for Perplexity. And in Perplexity, I'd say 1 out of 20, I get some serious hallucination on the answers. And the problem is with most browsers, you can only set one default search engine. And a lot of times I find myself manually typing in Kagi or Google or something like that, just because I need a URL. Like I don't need a whole, because Perplexity, like there's a good 5-second delay sometimes for it to write an answer for you. And I'm like, I just need the company's webpage, right? Like I'm just looking for is it .ai, .io, .zip?
Depending on the browsers and search engines, sometimes you can use like a Bang G to search on Google, right? Like I know DuckDuckGo was probably the first ones to do that.
I'm using Arc, and I thought it was able to. I can't get it to work. It might be that I'm using Windows and they prioritize Macs.
So I didn't even know Arc for Windows existed. So
for like 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, actually I do, and I've had some problems with it related to some control. So you might be right. It's not
it doesn't have 100%. Like on Mac, I think you could like click multiple tabs and move them from one space to another, and you can't do that on Windows. So there are some frustrating differences. All right. So moving on to advanced data protection for your iCloud data. I didn't know that existed until the UK wanted to put a backdoor.
So I guess the summary is the UK wants or has a law that would force Apple to give them access to data since 2022, though, iCloud has a feature where you can do end-to-end encryption. Like essentially, the keys get derived from your passcode on one of your devices. So if someone broke into your iCloud account, they wouldn't be able to restore an iCloud backup or backups of iMessage, photos. There's essentially pretty much everything except for mail and calendar gets encrypted end-to-end when you turn that on. But they released it in 2022, not on by default. It also had a lot of prerequisites, right? Like, all your devices need to be up to date. You need MFA and so on. So I think not a lot of people turned that on. I did really early on, and in the first, maybe before the first point release, I had like a few weird issues, like, this thing doesn't work on like a HomePod or whatever. And then after the first point release, rock solid, no problem. But then if you think about it, if I'm talking to you over iMessage and you're not doing that, well, my copy of our conversation is end-to-end encrypted in my iCloud backups, but they aren't in yours, right? And so you need a lot. Like, I think right now the amount of iMessage conversations that are end-to-end encrypted, including in the backups, must be super low. And, after San Bernardino, I think Apple was pretty happy for a while that, okay, we won't let anyone break into the phones, but if there's a warrant, we usually have an iCloud backup that has all the data in there, and they did not provide end-to-end encryption. So they added that in 2022, but they didn't. It's not like they ran an ad campaign for it. I think they were pretty happy to say, like, okay, the people that care enough will turn it on, and then law enforcement is not going to be too annoyed. But now it turns out the UK wants access to any Apple customer, not just people in the UK, which is a little bit crazy, but the side effect it had is, like, we're talking about this a lot more. And I think there's a lot of people who might have turned on the advanced data protection in the last week. So it's a kind of a Streisand effect. But then the question is, like, what are they going to do? Because it sounds like if they make this feature unavailable in the UK, it doesn't satisfy the law. But at the same time, the law is so crazy. Is someone really going to try and enforce it as is? So
I wondered, like, let's say that the UK successfully forces Apple to put a backdoor into all of their encryption. It's like, all right, great. I turn this on. Oh, there's a backdoor in it. They could get access to it anyway at that point.
Yeah. And in the law, it's pretty clear that they're not allowed to talk about this. So it leaked. I don't know if it's probably someone from Apple who leaked it, but it might be someone from the UK government who think it's bad. But if they really do it, and then one country has a backdoor into every other customer in every other country, it's over. Because after that, every country is just going to ask for their backdoors. And we just talked about, like, telecoms getting breached in the interview segment. And it's like, oh, you should use encrypted messaging because the telecoms are owned. Well, what do you think is going to happen with these backdoors? So I just think, again, for the 52nd time, it's hard to explain that there's no compromise in math. And you can't have a backdoor without having it getting exploited. That's not how encryption works. You won't just put a backdoor for the good guys. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, as soon as you do that, I mean, I can only imagine how the UK government would react if we demanded this. You give it to us, and Russia's like, "Hey, you give it to me too," and Apple, and name your adversarial country, right?
And China's like, "Hey." Just kidding. We already have it.
But they go through it, and how's the UK government going to react when, wait, you can give it to us, but you can't give it to them? That's illegal. Yeah. And it's like, this doesn't work when you're a multinational company.
Like you mentioned China. This is worse because iCloud is run by a partner in China. And of course, like, everything that's there is probably super easy to read for the government. But that's the Chinese customers. It's not like some random dude in Canada. Like, it doesn't go there. So it is actually worse, which is impressive. So I don't know what's going to be a little scary is if we don't hear about this again. If we don't hear about it for another 3 years, you're like, is the back door in?
Some kind of canary. Yeah.
Yep.
Sir Jonathan Snowden will run to Russia and tell us about it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would do that now.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's eyes are plastered to settings changes in different apps and terms of service changes and stuff like that. So people are looking for it for sure. So the last thing here, I saved this for last because I thought it would be fun, was Guillaume asked on LinkedIn, what is the most unhinged thing you've seen a security team push on people trying to be productive? And there's some great responses in there. Jason, I want to start with you. Did you get a chance to look at some of these responses? Do you have a favorite?
So my favorite actually,
or do you have a personal favorite?
I was about to say, I have a personal favorite. It didn't make this list. So my personal favorite was working at a company that was acquired by a larger organization. They said, we need to have security awareness training for everybody, right? So they blasted out, everybody has to take this class. You have to pass this test with a certain score and stuff like that. But it was technical security. Like questions would be like, okay, when you use a public key and a private key, is this asymmetric, symmetric, or X type of encryption? Now, for me, I'm able to roll through this pretty quickly.
We all know we need your private key to send you a private message, right? So we're good.
Yeah. But I'm listening to the graphic designers on the other side of the cubicle wall. They are making no bones about it. They're 100% cheating on this. I'm supposedly the security representative and I look at it, I was like, go for it. There's nothing here that you need to be, because there was nothing in this training that had anything to do with security awareness. It was training people to be security people. I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen.
Wow.
But everybody had to pass with like 80%.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Rant
Guillaume,
over.
What's your favorite here?
I don't know. Some of them.
Or do you have a personal favorite as well?
Well, I think one of the favorites I have on the list is someone said something, or maybe that was a DM, but someone told me about a company that was forcing scans, like AV scans, like scanning the whole drive on like Friday at noon, and the AV is so slow.
Was in here.
Oh, was it you? Yeah, I thought it was a really good one because I've also seen that one before, and it's usually like derived from like.
I fixed that. I moved it to 6 p.m. on Friday.
I move it to 6 p.m. But then there's always like someone saying, but due to compliance, we need to do this on everything. And then the laptops are going to be off, and then we don't have Wake Online. And so therefore we have to do it Monday at 9 , right?
I didn't ask permission. I just changed it to 6 p.m. from noon to 6 p.m. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared.
So that's definitely a bad one, like forcing. Oh, that was Greg Notch in the thread that mentioned that. You mentioned
his was slightly different. His was about patching.
Oh yeah, patching. Kind of the same thing, right? Like you make people's computers unavailable during business hours, which is
I believe we call the technical term for that is a denial of service attack.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely.
That's exactly what we call this.
So it adversely impacted the dev team was because we were a C++ shop, and when you compile stuff in C++, it generates a shitload of files, all these linker files. And because they had hundreds of thousands more files than other people, it took like 6 hours versus taking less than an hour on everybody else's machine.
If you have people, developing software on their corporate laptop, and you haven't tested your EDR on their machines, or back then AV, and you just decide to do a full scan, that's crazy. The other one I liked in the list is. Well, you mentioned companies that want to fire people who fail, a phishing test. I think that's very unhinged. The definition of unhinged, because first of all, I would like to know how some of these companies and people would define failing the phishing test. Because I would say, if I just clicked, is that really a failure? And then if I put in my credentials, well, you should be fired for not having like FIDO2. Exactly. 2FA, not me. So that was a pretty crazy one. Personally, one that I keep seeing is local admin privileges. The reason people want to remove them sometimes makes sense, right? So, for example, if you're still using like a traditional Active Directory, you've got maybe like service accounts running on a laptop that have like powerful credentials, which you definitely should not have. But I think a lot of people want to remove local admin privileges because they think it prevents people from running like random code. And it doesn't. Like some installers might fail if you're not local admin, but like on a Mac, for example, not only is the real admin the MDM, because you can't turn off your firewall because you're an admin if you have a profile, but I can drop any app to my applications folder in my home directory and run it. It's not application allow listing, it's local admin. And I've seen people push local admin removal to like developers that are all using Macs and Brew. You try using Brew when your local admin privileges have just been yanked, you've just destroyed productivity completely. So again, developers, I think a lot of people think that, like a PC at the cash at a bank is one thing. You can be super restrictive on that, and probably you should be, versus someone that's trying to develop code and that has to compile it and then maybe run it on their own. And then, it's not signed. Well, of course, I just ran it. I just built it on my own laptop. So it's a similar one. And then you mentioned 16 separate agents on a machine with 1 gig of RAM, right? That's a pretty common one. Laptops that take 20 minutes to boot. Like, honestly, I would quit a job over having a crappy laptop. It's just not acceptable anymore. Or like your laptop can't go to sleep anymore. Or takes too long to wake up. So anyway, are you going to put the link? The link is in the notes if people want to go comment. I'm sure there's people listening that have like even crazier examples.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some fabulous stories out there that people have run into.
Yeah, it's you have to remember that the company doesn't exist just so you have an infrastructure to secure, right? And so you got to think about the business running in all different aspects, if it's developers or cloud environments and so on. So it's like if you suddenly, blocked everyone's ability to send email attachments. Well, you better have trained people on the alternative method to communicate files, right? We saw that a lot when like Dropbox came around. Everyone wanted to use Dropbox because it's so much easier than what they had before, which was like a SMB share on some file server. And everyone who was just trying to block it, people just found a similar tool that they could use to do that, when the real solution was make sure you have a approved version of that tool that's really really efficient. It doesn't seem to work when you try to prevent people from getting work done in a more efficient manner. So there's a lot of that.
Hence the reason we're putting sensitive information inside of LLMs, because they're trying to get their work done.
And other SaaS. There's another one that I saw. It's not on the thread, but I saw in a semi-private forum. Really big companies that have a small amount of Apple devices really often have security teams that try to push the wrong control for controlling like a Mac or an iPad. So for example, instead of making sure that all the devices are bought and automatically enrolled to MDM and that you disable the iCloud services you don't want people to use, they'll just ask the network team to block every domain that relates to iCloud and Apple, which breaks a lot of things, including software updates, which from a security point of view is really not a good thing. So there's plenty of that when it's a team that's not familiar enough with the tech to secure it the right way, trying to apply controls from before.
Yeah, so good stuff. I don't think I mentioned my favorite, which I think might have been the forcing people to use Excel on Apple laptops. I think that was my favorite. I thought that was pretty evil.
Yeah. Just don't look at the job history of the guy who posted that and then cross compare it with mine.
Right. There's more details, but it's much more fun if you don't know the details, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I have memories of using Excel on a Mac, and like normally on a Windows PC, you can just like hold down an arrow key and it like quickly goes. Yeah, it doesn't work on a Mac. Doesn't happen.
Well, the good news is you don't need Excel anymore. Just paste the data in a Chat GPT window and you're good.
Exactly. All right. Thanks so much, Guillaume, for being my emergency Canadian co-host today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us, Jason, for the news. A lot of fun as always.
Yeah, thanks for I was glad I was able to at least make it to this part. I couldn't earlier.
Yeah.
But I made it here.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week, we'll be talking to Ed Gaudet about the state of cybersecurity in healthcare, and Tanya Jonka about her new book, Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding. See you then. Bye-bye.